Hello and welcome back to the Oh No 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 podcast. Now you might think that a 0-0 draw in Perth is not going to be the fertile talking point grounds that you'll get for a Scottish football podcast, but we're back here once again and we've got plenty to discuss as Dougie Imrie took his first league game yesterday up against St Johnstone, top of the league, and came away with a point, which is more than we've done so far this season. I'm your host this evening, Robbie, and joined firstly by Duncan Cameron. How are you getting on, Duncan?
I do. Yeah. Quite enjoyed yesterday, for all that there wasn't necessarily a huge amount of goalmouth action, and cooking for 10 or 12 earlier on today, so I had a lovely day, and thank you for picking up hosting duties, as I was otherwise engaged.
Yeah, I mean, that's completely understandable. And we're also joined by Alan Douglas-Munn as well. How are you getting on, Alan?
I'm good, mate, yeah. Made a fairly late decision to go up to Perth yesterday. It's pretty, I would say it's, almost certainly the shortest journey I have in the Championship this season. It's only half an hour up the road to Perth for me, compared to an hour for a home game. So made a late call to go up, and I'm glad I did. Yeah, which, it was a 0-0, but plenty to be encouraged about, and actually a decent amount to talk about as well, which is good.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get on to the talking points then. So we'll start with the pre-match. Rovers, an unchanged lineup. First time that we've seen, I think us use 4-2-3-1 against St Johnstone this season. Duncan, no changes understandable from Dougie Imrie?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think there was any... I suppose it's kind of two angles to it, isn't it? There's not a huge amount of flexibility there, given who we've got and who's missing. And then, nothing I think from that Alloa game that would have you jumping up and down and kind of screaming out for change. So certainly it was what I expected, and it made sense. It was kind of a tiny wee hope that we might see Richard Chin back on the bench, which would have been nice, but certainly I no complaints about the lack of changes from me.
Yeah, Chin's one that's, you hope he's going to be make a big impact returning to the squad, because it felt like he was really getting into his stride just before he got injured. To then lose him for such a long period of time, I mean, I know that the initial talk had been that he wouldn't be back until the new year, but hopefully in the next few weeks we'll be able to see him. And Alan, for yourself going into yesterday's game, obviously very tough away fixture against the St Johnstone team, who have been a bit out of sorts recently. I know that we spoke about it in the pre-match. The fundamentals of Dougie Imrie as a manager, did that give you quite a lot of hope going into a game like this, that we'd be able to go into it with a degree of enthusiasm?
It did. I mean, in terms of the lineup, I can't really say I had an issue with the lineup being the same, seeing as I was sat here on Thursday night and said I think the lineup should be the same. So I got what I asked for. But yeah, I mean, we've probably touched on that a wee bit in the pre-match, but Dougie Imrie seems to just kind of get that to build a team, you need to start at the back. You need to kind of make them solid and organised and tough to beat. And he's done that in the past with Morton. There were, say what you want about the way they played, but they were never an easy team to go and get a result from. And even the fact that he'd already taken Morton up to McDiarmid and got a draw this year, it did actually give me a little bit of kind of hope. And it was very much, genuinely, I think it was probably listening to his pre-match interview that made me say, you know what, screw it, I'm going. I probably would, and I'd probably gone anyway, because that's what happens on a Saturday. You kind of get there and you think, I could sit and try and follow this online, or I could actually go and see it and potentially regret it if I do go, but more, there's always the chance you regret if you don't go. But just listening to the way Dougie Imrie talks before the game, it's like, nah, I think we're going to get something here. I'm going to go for it. I did also put a draw in the prediction, so go me.
Well, patting on your own back there.
I didn't go for a score draw, unfortunately, but no.
Well, close but no cigar. Duncan, to look at our opponents from yesterday for a little bit of a change here. They made 3 changes to their starting 11, so I believe it's Adam Forrester came in for Regan Tumulty, but he actually played on the left of defence for the first time.
Yeah.
Jason Holt came in to replace Sprangor, and Sidibe came in to replace Uche Puezu. Both McPake and Gullen were fit for this one. The Saints fans maybe not in the most optimistic mood, but a return for some key players. It's probably a bit a degree for food for thought when you're looking at one of the top teams in the league.
Yeah, the big one that I was disappointed to see in the starting lineup was Jason Holt. I think he's just a very good player, and I think he's a real linchpin, I suppose, would be the term, for the way that they want to play and the way that you know how dangerous that front four can be. So much of what they can do because they know Jason Holt's in there behind them. You know, it's almost, if I could pick anyone to have been missing for St Johnstone, I'd have picked Jason Holt. As you say, Adam Forrester coming in playing on the left-hand side of the defence was interesting as well. It was one of these that, it takes you're 5 or 10 minutes into the game and you start, hang on a second, like, that left back, is he not a right back? And you're kind of having that, is he a left back? Pretty sure he's a right back. And as the game goes on, it became sort of increasingly apparent that very much playing on the wrong side. And he actually, he's got 2 shots in the second half, not to speed ahead, that a little bit like Kieran Tierney scoring that goal for Scotland. He's only really able to take them on because he's ostensibly on the wrong side. But I felt like the first half in particular, it hindered them a little bit. And that actually he was the one getting a bit of the space, but he was never quite sure where to be or what to do with it. Whereas, an orthodox left back might have just gone the overlap or slung some crosses into the box. But that St Johnstone side, I think, are a very good example of some of the bits that we are missing sometimes in the way, 2 players in particular to pull them out. So I think if you look at that front four of Sidibe, and to be fair, you can probably put Ikpeazu in for him without really changing this example. So Sidibe is the forward and Josh McPake on the left-hand side. I think you can more or less, in terms of profile, match 1-to-1 with us, right? So Jack Hamilton is Adama Sidibe in the sense of he's your out-and-out striker. So we've got that. And then, as I say, you've then got Josh McPake for Dylan Easton, as in he's your primary creative source. He's typically playing off the left. Obviously, as in terms of like output, set that aside. Just pure profile. Where you then start to differ is the other 2 players that St Johnstone have got in that front four. You've got Stevie Mallon, who is an out-and-out number 10, and I thought was at the heart of pretty much everything good they did, particularly in the first half yesterday. And then you've got Jamie Gullen as your kind of second striker. And they're pretty fluid there, really. As we know, Jamie Gullen will go everywhere. So although they were also in sort of a 4-2-3-1 like we were, they didn't really have anyone on the right-hand side at all, sort of outright. It was those 2 interchanging and flipping back and forth. And as I think that's one thing that we're missing, or 2 things, I suppose, that we're missing with the way that we are having to play at the moment. We just don't have that same kind of dedicated profile in those 2 positions. And when it works for St Johnstone, and it didn't to any great extent yesterday, but when it works, you can see why they're so dangerous going forward. And just the little bit of interchange and the little bits of football. There's one bit in particular in the highlights where Mallon sort of drops deep, and it's just one little touch and pass, and they spring open the whole right-hand side, that we just don't seem to have that same kind of capacity to do that. And again, it's something we've been talking about for a long time.
Yeah, it's. I know Dougie Imrie mentioned it, speaking to sort of the journalistic press following the game, sort of saying, like talking about getting to January and being able to add in additions, because at the moment we really can't. We're struggling. I've seen a few comments on the social media side of it last night about like, why aren't we signing players and centre forwards? And you're like, well, we can. We really can. It's like the big issue at the moment is that like if we sign an out of contract player, they're going to be unfit because they've not trained unless they've been training with another club. Or if we sign a player that's played in Ireland, for example, the registration's tied up till January, we can't use them at that point. Good example being Jordan Doherty last season. So if we went out and got Danny Mullen, for example, we couldn't use him until January. I feel like with St Johnstone, they're very much it's kind of, you look at them slightly enviously in the fact that they've probably got the thing that we want, which is to be able to pull out a player out of the firing line almost when they need it, to be able to introduce another one, because they can do that with Sidibe and Uche. They've got the ability to basically rotate them, and I kind of feel that at the moment we don't have that capacity with Jack Hamilton, just due to the circumstances that we find ourselves in. But yeah, to get into the game itself, Alan, early Saints sort of have the pressure, even within sort of the first minute and a half. They've got the ball for sort of a corner, ball goes wide. Did that sort of set the tone for you for the afternoon, that it was going to be one where, from a Rovers perspective, we really needed the defence to be on point, and it was going to be an afternoon where we needed that focus and concentration from our back four and Josh Rae?
Absolutely, and one of the big factors in that is, St Johnstone have a fair bit of pace up front. Sidibe's pretty quick. Jamie Gullen's not exactly slow. So as well as kind of concentrating, you as well as actually just the basics of defending, you need to really concentrate on kind of the off the ball runs that they're making as well. And we got caught a couple of times without it kind of really leading to anything. I mean, it did lead to a Paul Hanlon yellow card at one point, because he was just purely beaten for pace. It was a genuine attempt to get the ball, and Sidibe was just much, much quicker than Paul Hanlon, which is not a real surprise to anyone. Paul Hanlon wasn't the quickest when he was in his 20s, so he's not going to have got any quicker with age. But yeah, I mean, it set the tone, but you never really felt like they were cutting us open at all. I thought we had to defend well, and we did. The whole of the back four, I thought, had a really, really good game. There was a few moments where maybe things got, someone got out of place and someone got past them, but there was always someone there covering for them. If anything, I thought the biggest danger they posed was at set pieces. And that's not because of their really good front players, just because of the giant defender they can send up, whose name Diabate.
Yeah.
I mean, he is a real threat at set pieces. He had a really good header that could thankfully it didn't come to much, but I always felt that was a danger, especially with the quality of deliveries from Malin as well. I mean, there was one actually where they got a free kick on the edge of the box, and I'm thinking, you dare Jamie Gullen, and then Jamie Gullen walks away for it. I'm thinking, oh yeah, they've got Stephen Malin as well. Oh no, so they've just got so many options up there. It's really, really annoying. But yeah, on the whole, in that early play, if anything, as much as we were under a wee bit of pressure, it gave me more confidence than anything, because I'm thinking, well, if this is the best they're going to throw at us, we're coping with it pretty well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Watching the game, sort of as it progressed, I felt that St Johnstone looked comfortable in possession. I know that you mentioned Jason Hope, Stevie Malin, Josh McPake there, Duncan, all very keen to get on the ball. Rovers quite keen to sort of try and press to a degree, sort of maybe a low line of engagement. But then, how well do you think that our sort of players did in marshalling that trio, as to the first half in particular?
Yeah, I think you both just mentioned the key point there, which was the kind of deeper line, that not leaving that space in behind. If you think back to the game at Starks Park, it's a very high Rovers line that gets caught out with it. It's a brilliant, again, we talked about it at times, a brilliant pass from Rhys McAleer, and Sidibe does brilliantly to be on it in a flash and to run through and finish. But it wasn't just that broadly didn't happen, and as you say, Alan, the one time it threatened to. Paul Hanlon gave away the yellow card, and it was fine. That was preferable. But that was the halfway line in that first game. I don't think Paul Hanlon and Darragh O'Connor get close to the halfway line, especially again in that first half. Like, there was no chance of being caught out in that same way. And so you are asking St Johnstone to come and play in front of you and try and make something happen. And again, I think that's why the chances that they're getting predominantly are from the set pieces.
Yeah.
Because
and I think the flip side of that as well is, though, what you gain in protecting your own goal, you lose in forward momentum.
Yeah.
Because, we were playing the ball across the back line a lot, and just about every time Darragh O'Connor got the ball, his only option was back to Josh Rae. Maybe he could miss out Rae and go to Hanlon, but there was nobody dropping in from the midfield. There was just nothing in that. And that was because St Johnstone were playing such they were playing the high press. Barry Robson's old favourite. They were putting us under a lot of pressure, and there was just no option for them. And it got a wee bit frustrating at times. You would pass. Like, I think there's one where it genuinely went from left to right, back to left, via Josh Rae about 2 or 3 times, and then it went to Josh Rae, and he just punted it up the park, and St Johnstone came at us. But it was genuinely just down to the fact that there were no options there. And it's very easy to say, if Sean Byrne was fit and he was there, he'd have been dropping. And we've obviously since learned that Paul Niso was operating off his zero sleep pretty much. So I think that was probably a factor in that as well. But yeah, it made it a lot harder for us to get create any chances. But ultimately, probably stopped us conceding some goals.
Yeah, again, I think that's credit to Jason Holt and Rhys McAleer as well. They're a very, very good holding midfield. So you're asking a lot to try and play through them. But you're right in what you say there, that we don't necessarily... You're starting from so deep. It's going to take a lot to then kind of spring through. And the couple of chances that we do get in the first half, you see it's kind of getting quite boxed in the midfield, but just finding just enough space to sort of send out a big diagonal.
Yeah.
And then it's trying to set Paul McMullen into a one-on-one. But even at that, you're asking an awful lot. You're really... It's kind of right, Paul, can you bring down this big diagonal and beat your man and finish? Probably starting from 40 yards away from the goal. It's a big ask. And again, I think it was pretty telling that the one big chance we did have in the first half is a set piece of our own. There wasn't a huge amount of open play, and I think that again, I think St Johnstone that probably, I think like they if they could get that first half back again, I think they'd make some changes. I think if they had one as an actual out and out left back, probably would have helped. And even on the other side, like Regan Tumley over Liam Smith would have been a little bit more adventurous. It felt like they were pushing their fullbacks on to a point and then passing it into their midfield, as opposed to just really trying to go beyond, and that would have potentially been a way to kind of get in behind us.
You wonder if that was going maybe for the more defensive option at right back, thinking that Dylan Easton's going to be out there.
Yeah, potentially.
Maybe.
And that, I think the thing as well, they did have enough chances. Like, we'll come on to talk about the overall approach from the manager. But that's the way it's going to go. They had chances, and if they take one of them in the first half, it then becomes a very different game. But they weren't hammering the door down looking for them, really. As you say, a lot of that first half, it's headers. Diabate, I think that's 3 in a row. And even at that, he's not really, he's not bulleting them at Josh Rae. And again, I think there's one proper save, maybe you would call it that. I think from Mallon that Rae makes, but
yeah, that's probably the one that came out, and then Stevenson chested it back to him.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But it could have been more uncomfortable. I think you could see why the St Johnstone fans were maybe getting a wee bit frustrated from that as well.
you think though there's a degree where when a club, because we had this, I sort of said this yesterday to one of the St Johnstone fans on Twitter. They were, because he basically said to me, like, within 15 minutes you could tell it was a Dougie Imrie team. Was his comment, and I was like, it's frustrating when you're on the St Johnstone side of it, because you see your team with so much of the ball, and we in particular used to see this a lot in League One with Rovers, when we would have a team like a Stranraer or a Forfar, for example. They come to Starks. Montrose were good at it as well, to be fair to them. They would come to Starks and they would sit in and they would soak up the pressure, and then all of a sudden they would be able to spring. And I think to a certain extent, having Smith as that more defensive minded might have been a degree as well to sort of, with Paul McMullen in mind, like him being able to break out and being able to get that, because he's never really had any opportunities to be able to do that as such yesterday. In those rare frays, I think that when we did get on the ball, we were actually pretty decent in tight spaces. There were a few points where we were able to knock the ball around the corner, a few times when Josh Mullen was able to find some space and get balls in. Few and far between, obviously, but reasonable enough. You've mentioned Paul Niso. I think it'd be remiss to sort of Duncan not go into his partner in the centre of midfield, Scott Brown. Positive to see him building on last week's performance. Felt like an all-action performance from Scott Brown.
Yeah, definitely. Again, I think it's not to turn this into an entire back-patting episode, but I think it's vindication for what a lot of people have been saying for a lot of this season, which is, if you could ask Scott Brown to do Scott Brown's job, please, he'd maybe be getting on a lot better. And that's what we've seen these last few weeks, starting under Paul Hanlon and now under Dougie Imrie. You know, he's playing deep enough and with the stated mission of go and be all action, go and do that. Don't try and kid on that you're a number 10. And it's, you can see it. He looks like he looked last season. You're just like, there's a really good midfielder for this level. And again, he's not going to win a huge bundle of Man of the Match awards. He's not going to win Player of the Year. But you are going to win football matches with him playing like that. It's going to be a huge contributing factor. And I think, again, as we've seen, if he's not there doing that job, you're going to lose football matches. And as we've said, like, that's not an easy game by any means at all. It's almost in, at least in terms of like intention, it's not an easy game, but it's a straightforward game for your Paul Hanlons, your Darragh O'Connors. Like, their job is very, very clear. You know, you're not going to go roving anywhere. You're going to stay relatively deep. We're going to defend in front of ourselves and win your headers, beat your man. Scott Brown's got actually quite a complex job in a game like that, because the other team's going to have a lot of the ball, so that needs to be your primary job. But if we are going to get going, it's probably going to have to come through you. And I thought he did do that very well. Yeah, definitely.
There's the two things with Scott Brown, actually. First of all, he's getting back to that player that I remember from a few years ago where you could tell when he wasn't in the team because there was a big Scott Brown-shaped hole in the middle of that park. You missed him when he wasn't there. And he's kind of getting back to that. And I don't think it was ever anything that he was too... You know, Barry Robson's gone. I didn't want to jump on the whole let's blame Barry Robson for everything thing. It's not, it doesn't help anything. But he is looking more himself. And the other, without, well, actually, no, I can't say without jumping ahead, because I am jumping ahead to the second half. When he then played the whole second half with Ross Matthews, I was left thinking, oh, they can play together. Now, don't get me wrong, part of that's because they're both they can be defensively minded, and my God, we did a lot of defending in that second half. Yeah. So that was probably a factor in them actually looking okay together, because it was just a case of, right, Scott, you try and get the ball and drive forward with it. Ross, smash. That was basically it, you know.
And listen, while we're on the midfield, fair play to Paul Niso as well.
Yeah.
By all accounts.
Oh, absolutely.
had been down south for a family funeral the day before, to turn up. Dougie Imrie himself, I think, said, he's like, listen, maybe I shouldn't have played him. And I mean, honestly, who knows? But fair play to him for turning up, making himself available, and I thought he was fine first half. He was the obvious choice for the sub, given he'd been booked, and the booking itself comes from a bit of a mistake that he makes, and he kind of compounds with the foul. But he didn't look out of place. He wasn't. It wasn't like, oh my god, he can't possibly come back out for the second half, which is something I have said on multiple occasions about multiple players this season.
It was interesting actually that Dougie mentioned that.
I think with the Niso one, I think it's interesting because I think it was a real willingness to take one for the team with his booking, because it was actually Easton that loses the ball initially, like quite far in our own half.
Both of them were at fault there.
Yeah,
it was like Easton didn't want the ball and Niso gave it to him. Niso didn't want it back and Easton gave it back to him. It was like, could you two stop this?
I'd just say though that it was a recurring theme in that first half, and you look back to the Airdrie game. Carol sort of mentioned that in our chat, like, we're picking up a lot of bookings, and it's like, yeah, but that's absolutely fine, because when you look back to the Airdrie game, when they were floating through our team at will, it's a big, and again, that's Paul Hanlon had 4 days in charge before that, so you've got to sort of temper your expectations. But it's good to see players being stuck in certain roles and just committing to it and sort of saying, no, not today. It's not happening for you.
No. When you see the midfielders just strolling through like that, you're just like, somebody needs to take one for the team. Well, we picked up 3 bookings yesterday with guys taking one for the team, so there was plenty of that there. The interesting point that Dougie Imrie mentioned in I think it was in his post match, that he knew a bit about Paul Niso before he came in as well, because he'd watched him a few times for Rangers B. So I'm saying knows more about him than any of us did, because until he actually came in for his debut, we didn't know what kind of player he was at all. So
he says he likes him because he's seen a lot of them, which is nice. Obviously, he's not going to say anything other than that, but stuff nice to hear anyway.
I can't believe we've got stuck with this guy. It's really unfortunate. No, it's not going to happen like that, is it? But I think that for Niso, he's came in and he's looked reasonably solid. I think that you can see that at least as a base level, there's a player that can play in the Championship. He doesn't. He's, as you say, we've had plenty of players come from Auchenhowie before, where they've really not looked up to the part, or maybe needed a bit more time to develop. All at different points of their career. Some players are tipped as wonder kids and they just never hit the ground, and they need to go off and do other things before they can sort of become regulars at that level. You've got other players that just look pretty smack bang average. And I think that for Niso, bearing in mind it's his first season in senior football, in a sense of professional game. You've got players' livelihoods. You also don't get that. For B football, you don't get the added pressure of people getting the same level of stick. And that's a key component in football. That this season's been mentally tough, probably, I would imagine, for a lot of people within the club, in a sense of you're going out, people have got an expectation, you start the season really well, and then it all starts going wrong, and you're a bit like, whoa, what's happening here?
It's also the case that if you're playing for Rangers B, how many times do you go at a game and the manager says, listen, we're going to be really up against it today?
Yeah.
We might not have very many chances. In fact, our best chance of a result is probably a 0-0.
Mm-hmm.
How often, I don't know what, if any, kind of European competitions Rangers B play in, and if they do, what kind of pressure is attached. But I can't imagine the Rangers B manager, whoever that is, it sets his team out in a kind of backs to the wall fashion very often.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure. And I think the big thing with the half-time substitute is it was the most like-for-like sub that we had available. At kick-off, it was the easiest change. If you'd right, here's your starting 11. Pick one of your subs. The most straightforward one to make is Matthews for Niso. So when you get to half-time and he's been booked, it was an easy change to make.
So there was one major chance in the first half for Rovers, which was, as you touched on earlier, I believe it was yourself, Duncan, that flagged up Josh Mullen corner into Jordan Doherty, who has, safe to say, a free header. sort of 6 yards out or so. Alan, what did you make of the chance? Did you sort of see that as one of the bigger opportunities? And just, I mean, is that one maybe Jordan Doherty unlucky, or should he do better? A chance to cement himself as joint second top scorer in the league, I believe. So,
I mean, first of all, as we've come to expect, really good delivery for Josh Mullen, who I thought, had another good game and, under tough circumstances. Really good ball in. Great run for Jordan Doherty. I kind of like what we're doing with set pieces now. We're just not just in the delivery, but the kind of runs that the players are making, which doesn't just go down as credit to Dougie Imrie. They were kind of starting to do that under Paul Hanlon before as well. And yeah, really good run. He gets a really good connection with it. He gets a decent amount on the header. It's unfortunately just straight down the keeper's throat. And a pretty straightforward save for him. It's hard to criticise him. The first thing you say there always is try and get it on target, and you give yourself a chance. It's easy to say, get it down the way, get it in the corner, but it's not easy when the ball's whipping in. You've got guys pushing you around and pulling you, and you've got folk running around everywhere. It is just a case of try and get it on target and see what happens. Could he have done better? If you were to ask Jordan Doherty this, I'm fairly certain he would say he should have done better with it. So who am I to argue? But I'm not gonna blame him and say we would have won the game if he hadn't had such a poor header, because he did well to get there.
Yeah, I mean, given the contribution that Jordan Doherty's had in the sort of year that he's been here, I think that he's more than credit in the bank.
Absolutely,
he's full up on that point. So we reach half time. I mean, St Johnstone, they do sort of have a half chance, which McPake fires into the side netting, which prompted a sort of celebration from some degree of the home fans.
It's always great when that happens.
Well, it was us last week, if it's any consolation, lads. Duncan, is it too simplistic to say that we'd not have seen the same ability to soak up pressure from Barry Robson, given the way that he was setting up his teams, or what did you make of the first half? And what's the mood like in away support?
So, I think this is a really interesting point about Robson. And apologies if I kind of step on a talking point you wanted to come to, because there was a bit of chat yesterday about not only could Robson have done that, but if Robson had done that, what would the reaction have been? Because we were obviously, us three, other people on the podcast, and the wider support, pretty critical of Barry Robson's style, if you want to call it that. And you could make a case that it's hypocritical to then watch your team, to put not too fine a point on it, shitfest a point at McDiarmid Park and then give it, isn't this new manager amazing? Which, again, to a fair degree, we maybe did yesterday. So, would Robson have done that first of all? I don't think so. I don't think so. That there's a degree of honesty, maybe, in terms of like honest endeavour or honest intentions, like a degree of deliberateness about Dougie Imrie's approach to getting points like that. Again, we've seen it with his Morton team. We saw it, his Morton team did it at McDiarmid Park early in the season, as you said, Alan, where it was a real, if you can't get 3 points, definitely take one. We've come with a point, we're going to leave with a point. All these kind of cliche-driven, but fundamentally, kill the game, take your time, don't do anything stupid, defend deep. All these things that come with it. That when you do all of those things and you draw 0-0, I think you deserve full credit for doing it, because that was the intention, effectively. Now, obviously, you'd love to nick a goal somewhere, and that was very much what happened when he took his Morton time. They scored after 20-something minutes, and it was only about 5 minutes to go that St Johnstone equalised. I don't believe we would have seen the same from Barry Robson. I think it wouldn't have been the same idea. I think he'd have probably had sort of greater intentions to go and try and go sort of toe-to-toe and go and try and do things on our own terms that wouldn't have then yielded the same result. I think we would have seen more panicky long balls out from the back, probably a higher line, which then makes it a little bit easier to play against. And maybe that's not true. Again, we'll never know. But that was my immediate thought at full time was that is the Dougie Imrie-est point that you'll get. Like, he has won that point. You know, when you look at football teams and you think, right, what impact is the manager having on this side versus, you know, the best or the worst players they've got? Like, that was Dougie Imrie's impact all over that game yesterday. And so I think he deserves full credit for it. And in terms of the second part, that you didn't ask, but that I've created for myself, second part of that question.
Even when he's not hosting, he's still hosting his head.
Can't help myself.
It's fair. It's fair.
In terms of the perception, would Robson have gotten away with that? I think at the start of the season, probably would have done. If it had been 4 weeks ago, he was too far gone that it wouldn't have mattered. And again, I think it's very different if you are talking about, you know, he didn't talk a good game. He talked a terrible game. That was one of his problems. But if you're talking about your approach and all these different bits and pieces, and then you get a 0-0 draw, I think that's very different to doing 7 different things all in aid of, well, actually, I keep saying a 0-0 draw. Let's be slightly more charitable than that. Keeping a clean sheet was the aim yesterday. Because if you score a goal, you score a goal. Brilliant. We had a chance late on. But I think if you were writing up a list of aims for the Rovers in that game yesterday, aim number 1 was keep a clean sheet. And everything else we did was in aid of that. And I don't think that's defeatist either. Because again, I think you could point, what are you doing? You know, your starting point is just to keep a clean sheet.
Certain members of St Johnstone Twitter would say that you're sitting in and holding out for a draw with 10 men. But what we're calling it pragmatic, because we're on a higher level than that.
It's whether it's a higher level, whether it's a lower level, I don't care. It's realism is what it is. And it's quite, again, we're still on a honeymoon period with Dougie Imrie, so like everything he does, I'm willing to give him credit for doing it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But he's not come in and gone, oh, right, okay, this team really struggles to score goals. Well, if we just have a real can-do attitude, maybe we'll be able to score. He's looked at it and gone, this team doesn't score goals. Our best chance of getting a result here is a 0-0. And if we score a goal, because it's a set piece and one of our big centre-halves gets up and scores, then great, that's an added bonus, effectively. But there's no point going out there and going, you know, we're going to go and try and outgun the opposition when you don't have any guns. Well, that's harsh, but it's also true. Yeah, exactly.
Just to reassure you, Duncan, actually, you're not imagining things. Robbie did actually ask the second part of that question. It wasn't just in your head. And you know what? I can't actually disagree with anything you've said. I don't think Robson would have got that result because he wouldn't have had us sitting so deep. The defence would have been 10, 15 yards further up. The midfield would have been further up, trying to would have played the long ball and then tried to win the ball off them up there. And CDB would have scored a hat-trick over the top of us. Personally, that's why.
Probably also.
If Robson had done that, or got that result playing that way, again, it's easy to feel negative about him because that's just the way we've been for the last few months. You kind of feel it would have been in spite of his tactics rather than because of them. And then my kind of third point in it would be that, yes, Imrie is in a honeymoon period. If we were to play the same way the next time we go to McDiarmid Park, I'm not sure I'd be quite so happy with the way we played, but I almost certainly would probably accept a draw again. Because I mean, you've got to look at it. We went away from home. We're really struggling to score goals, and we're away to the team who has the best defensive record in the Championship. Us scoring goals in that game wasn't particularly likely. We were also playing against a team who've scored the most goals in the Championship, and they never really troubled us that much. We looked pretty comfortable at the back, so was it the prettiest game of football to watch? Hell no. Would I have taken a draw before the game? Absolutely. Are there more positives than negatives? Definitely. So, St Johnstone fans can say what the hell they want about us online. They've not been watching us all season.
It's like I said to Scott a few episodes ago. Like, if you listen to the opposition fans on whatever they were saying, and obviously I'm fully aware of this given that I use Pine Bovril quite frequently, but if you listen to people that are just going to sit outside your club basically talking shit about your club, you're going to have a very tough time, because they're always going to tell you the absolute worst, and you've got to be realistic. Much if St Johnstone went away to Celtic Park and scored a 1-0 winner and had one shot, one goal, and Celtic had 25 shots and 13 off target, like the circumstances would then change in their favour for their fan base. It's one where you've just got to adjust your attitude. Duncan, to sort of turn the topic to a point that Alan kind of briefly touched on there, are we starting to see the benefits of this Darragh O'Connor-Paul Hanlon partnership at the back? Maybe had a bit of a rocky start in the last few games, being able to get clean sheets on board.
Yeah. I've never been overly down on it anyway. Even when we were conceding goals the way I've conceded, I felt Darragh O'Connor, since he's come in, has been on a level with Callum Fordyce. I never particularly saw it as a downgrade. As it stands now, I wouldn't say it's an upgrade. Actually, I think although they're different players, quality-wise, I don't think there's been a drop-off at all. I think we're very, very fortunate to have three guys of that level to call on as dedicated centre-halves before you even need to worry about bringing Jordan Doherty across, which we've also got the option to do. Again, you don't have to go into the mists of time to look at very good Rovers sides who've effectively had two centre-halves. And then it's as soon as they go, you're jerry-rigging somebody else, or you're bringing in a guy who's effectively not ready for this level. So, yes, I enjoy watching Paul Hanlon, Darragh O'Connor. I mean, but actually, let's talk about Paul Hanlon for a bit, because we never do, and he's so good. Like, we never talk about him because it's obvious. Like, that's the reason why it doesn't come up very often, because his level of performance is so high every week. He's not
also possibly because Ian Latto took a step back from the podcast.
But it's like he's not going to get a huge amount of headlines, because as a team overall, we've not been one of the standout teams in the division. But I mean, on an individual basis, Paul Hanlon's going to be top 3 defenders in the league. Like, he just does. It's like that yesterday, a great example. You only need to watch highlights of a couple of St Johnstone games this season to see how much of a handful Adama Sidibe can be. I don't think he was particularly good yesterday, but that again, I think that's a reflection of how well he was marshalled. And then you're worrying about him for 80 minutes, and then Uche Ekpiatsu comes on, and Paul Hanlon never blinked. And again, Ekpiatsu's so strong, and there's a couple of points where there's balls that are played up to him, and he holds off Paul Hanlon because he's the size of a wardrobe. Like, he's absolutely massive, but he doesn't turn that into a clean shot, because Hanlon's still there. Even if he's not getting that first contact, he's still doing enough to put the forward off. So yes, Paul Hanlon has been excellent throughout, and I think Darragh O'Connor has slotted in more or less seamlessly alongside. And actually, if it wasn't for the likes of those two and Lewis Stevenson, Jordan Doherty, and Callum Fordyce previously, we would be in a lot more trouble than we are. But actually, they've papered over a fair few cracks at other points this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'll come on to Josh Rae as well at the end of the game. But St Johnstone did get the ball into the back of net, Allan. Stephen Mallon poked it home, but Josh McPake judged to have been offside. What did you make of that decision? Do you think it was the right call? And as well, sort of looking pre-match into a bit of the discussion that had been happening online with St Johnstone fans, we'd mentioned it in the pre-match ourselves about their sort of talk of frustration in their build-up, sort of taking maybe 2 or 3 touches, passing the ball about, patient build-up. Do you think Dougie Imrie kind of leaned into that, into actually being able to weaponise that against St Johnstone, turning their fans maybe a bit against them?
He did. It was actually it was interesting to kind of listen to, actually, because you could hear them getting more and more frustrated as the game went on. Obviously, where we were sat in that I think it's the Jeff Brown stand, you're pretty close to some of the St Johnstone fans, and you could just hear them getting really, really more and more annoyed as the game went on. And I think that fed into the players in terms of they were getting frustrated that basically because we were just so well organised and solid at the back that they tried so many different things and just it didn't work. And we even kind of we stopped giving away quite so many free kicks. There still did have a few that they could throw in, but I think second half they weren't really getting anything from set plays as much. That Hanlon and O'Connor, to kind of touch on what Duncan just said, were just imperious at the back. They just mopped up. I mean, to be fair, these guys have been doing it, especially Paul Hanlon. He's been headering away crosses for probably the best part. Almost 20 years as a footballer. It's bread and butter to him, to use a good old footballing cliche. And I think that feeds into because they were getting frustrated. It just causes them to make a few errors. So making that run just half a second too early, and we've held a line, and he's been offside. There was no argument from their side, and yeah, you could say they've made a mistake, but I think it's been a forced error. We've forced them into trying something different, and he's just gone too early because he knew he kind of had to, and he's taken a chance, and it's not worked out. And there's nothing yes, scoring a goal is very, very good, but your opponent's scoring a goal and then it gets ruled off and you get to laugh at them for cheering is just brilliant as well, especially when you're that close to them.
Yeah, that was probably the only time in the entire game they get behind our defence.
Yeah, and they could only do it by
I think he's offside. He's certainly he's beyond Jordan Doherty, who's his man. If he's marginally or potentially in line with Paul Hanlon or Darren O'Connor, it's impossible to tell, but the flag's up very early, and the both O'Connor and Hanlon, who are looking along the line, their hands go up instinctively as soon as the ball's played. But
I've not watched the St Johnstone highlights. I don't know if they have an extra camera down there or not that have a better angle. I don't think they do, because I was kind of sat next to one of the camera gantries down at our end, and there was no camera in there. So
one thing I will say for that second half, around about that time, they were so confident that we weren't going to score. I will say that. They were so far pushed on, to the point where I couldn't believe it at one point. Everybody other than their goalkeeper was within 30 yards of our goal. They just pushed their entire team up and just dragged us back. And it was like a second phase, a third phase, because obviously we're quite happy defending the box. So they were forced into going wide and then putting a cross in, and it was headed out. But it was like every time that happened, it was like Space Invaders. You get to the side and all the aliens just step forward one. It was like their entire team, every time they recycled the ball, just stepped up another 10 yards. And by the third or fourth phase, as the entire game was within 30 or 40 yards of our goal. And I was just thinking, even under perfect circumstances, we could have been 5-0 up in that game, and we couldn't have done that. because you think all it takes is to lose the ball slightly and Sidibe is just going to go away and score very much like he did in the first. And I think like that is a reflection of quite simply just how little goal threat we carry at the moment. So, that they are like not even leaving one guy looking over his shoulder, because it's effectively a case of like, right, if we lose this ball here and the Rovers go to break away, effectively all you've got to do is just try and get somebody near Paul McMullen, because Hamilton's not got the pace for that, Mullen's not got the pace for that, Easton's not got the pace for that. None of these guys are quicker than Adam Forrester, to name one St Johnstone defender. And that's, again, that's the kind of thing that maybe I would have slaughtered Barry Robson for, and instead I'm like, actually, you know what? I think that's a sign of confidence that Dougie Imrie is quite happy to have his entire team penned into their own 18-yard box.
He did leave Paul McMullen up when St Johnstone had a corner.
Yeah,
and probably for that reason, actually, that he's the one with the pace. So
the commentary,
if we clear the ball long, he's the one most likely to get onto it and maybe try and hold it up, or not necessarily for creating a chance, but just allow the team to kind of push out a wee bit.
A bit of the commentary from the St Johnstone side recently is about like, why aren't we leaving a man up for a corner when they're defending them? But one change that Dougie Imrie did make to sort of counteract this was introducing Kai Montague into the mix. Duncan, what did you make of his performance, adding a bit of energy into the middle of the park?
I think that's exactly it. I think you've hit the nail on the head. That was exactly why he came on. St Johnstone were just able to settle a little bit more than I think we liked in that second half. Not only when they were entirely within our half, but even when they were kind of building out from the back. I just think it was a little too staid, a little too slow from the Rovers in terms of they'd been at that hard shift all afternoon, and it was starting to go away, and you could see the point where whenever either one of St Johnstone's centre-halves were on the ball, and Diabate was so happy to run it out as well as passing it out, between Hamilton, Easton, Brown, Matthew, you'd see them starting to look like, please don't drag us around here again. And sometimes that's all it takes to give that encouragement to the opposition. And I think Montague came on to rectify that as much as anything, just to be that little bit more energy, little bit more pace, just to kind of buzz bomb around. Because we know, quite simply, there's no getting away from it. At this point in time, he does not offer you the same quality as Dylan Easton does. But if you can't get near the ball as it stands, that quality doesn't really count for anything. And I think it did help to kind of break up that latter stage. And Dougie Imrie was straight over to him at full time for a very kind of Pep Guardiola-esque immediate on-pitch coaching session. Like, see, when you were right there 2 minutes ago, you could have done this. But it's confidence in using his squad. And actually, to another point on, would Barry Robson have gotten that result? Would Barry Robson have put 4 or 5 subs on away at McDiarmid Park with a point on the line? I don't know that he would have. Again, maybe he would have. But I thought it was a bold change. It's a change you could be criticised for, but I thought it worked as much as anything. And I like what I see from Kai Montague. Again, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna say I think he's a player who's ready to go and shine week on week out in the Championship. But in a team that, as we've already said, lacks a natural number 10, I've absolutely no qualms whatsoever about seeing more and more from him as time goes on, because he could potentially fill that gap.
Yeah, it's looking ahead to Tuesday. I'd be keen to see if that's one that Dougie Imrie does decide to go with as a potential option. But we'll come to that in due course. Duncan's mentioned there, Alan, about the sort of communication from Dougie Imrie, and as well Andy Milne deserves a bit of credit as well. Was it good? Naturally, with where the Rovers fans were positioned, you'll been a bit closer to sort of the away dugout. Were you quite impressed by what you've seen in terms of the sort of communication between them and on the park?
Absolutely. I mean, Dougie Imrie doesn't ever sit down during a game, which most managers don't, to be fair. But he was constantly, talking to the players, and it wasn't just you couldn't hear exactly what he was saying, but it didn't look like it was just shouting for shouting's sake. He was kind of telling them where they should be. He was pointing them into, correcting things that they were doing wrong. He just seems to be a guy who knows how to manage a football match, not just manage the players, manage the club, if you like, but actually how to look at what's happening in a game, look at what individual players are doing in a game, and make changes to it to try and get something more out of it. And Andy Millen as well. Andy Millen was out during the warm up doing a lot of kind of talking to the players, and again fairly active on the touchline. And it might be absolutely nothing. You can't hear what they're saying. You don't know that it's having an effect on the players, but it just gives you the confidence that these guys know what they're doing. And there were a lot of times where you didn't know if Barry Robson knew what the hell he was doing, or if the players knew what they wanted him to do. You could see that the players knew exactly what Dougie Imrie wanted from them, and they were doing their best to do it.
This is another one of these things that just the lens completely shifts as soon as he's your manager. I'm just thinking back to so many cold Tuesday nights at Capello in that pokey wee stand behind the dugouts, and just thinking, shut up, you won't sit down. Why? You've been out there for 45 minutes, just not shut up once, just beat it. And as soon as he's your manager, you're like, good on you. Get them told. You should be out there.
100% my attitude to the whole thing. Duncan. We do make a few more changes before the end of the game. Josh Rae comes on to replace Paul McMullen, so that was about roughly 20 minutes to go. And then with 10 minutes to go, we see Callum Smith and Ewan Wilson introduced for Jack Hamilton and Josh Mullen, respectively. There were a few chances for Saints, probably the best chances they had in the game, Duncan. A Forrester sort of long-range effort. Got to give a bit of credit. Is it Josh Rae that came off there?
I thought it was Josh Rae at the time, yeah.
And just your take on that.
Yeah, again, you will get chances. There's never a game like that where one side is very clearly more happy with the point than the other. Or there's very few of them that then play out in a midfield stalemate. Generally, it's one-way traffic, and either you see it out or you don't. And the one where Jamie Gullen hits the post, at the time, my immediate thought, because I was in kind of denial or bargaining or whatever mode you're in with 2 minutes to go in a game that you're clinging on to. I thought that's a very tight angle. He's hit the post, because I'm not sure that would have, he's not got the angle for that to go in. If that's 2 inches further in, Ray's not getting anywhere near it, but he did make good saves with the others. I'd say that Forrester drive is one that, if you are playing a normal left back, he's not stepping onto that on his stronger foot. It's the fact that Forrester's on the wrong side that lets him step in and hit that. And yeah, you need somebody to just put their head in the way of it, which I think it is Josh Rae who does that.
Thankfully, he has a fine head of hair instead of being like us on it. Probably didn't get off on it.
A real chance that just skites up and into the roof of the net. My overall reaction with these subs, and it was the same last week as well, and a total, hindsight is 20/20 thing, but I just think, how many minutes would Lewis Gibson have played if we hadn't sent him out on loan to go and get minutes?
Yeah.
When you look at this now, that's two fullbacks coming on to play on the wing. Lewis Gibson could have been either one of those. Almost certainly he would have been one of them. And we've seen it in other games recently as well. Not that those guys have let us down by any means at all. And again, it's something we talked a lot about last week with Wilson coming on the wing. Dougie Imrie very much putting his faith in guys to come on and play with them. They're maybe not necessarily completely comfortable.
I'm not sure if he's just on loan till January or it's full year, but if it is full year and he's got a chance to call him back, I'd be very surprised if Dougie Imrie doesn't bring Gibson back in January.
Yeah, I would
just to kind of have a look at him. And I mean, he's been at events and stuff, and I think he's probably still trains with the team because Montrose are only part-time, so he'll probably train with us during the week. So I've had a good look at him anyway, but I'd be very surprised if he doesn't bring him back in.
Yeah, I would be very shocked if he didn't. I think I would expect that there will be a break in the contract when we hit the transfer.
I think there always is now.
Yeah,
I think contracts just in terms of like SPFL regs, it's window to window basically.
And again, I'm sure I've said this before. Probably from Lewis Gibson's perspective, he's quite happy in the sense that he's getting regular game time now as a starter for Montrose, I believe. Didn't check how they got on yesterday, but they've obviously had a more difficult spell. But at the same time, he is our player, isn't it? So it's one where like we're not a charity, unfortunately, to be able to go off and sort of say just go off and play there. And when things do get tight, especially when we sort of have that injury for Richard Chin as well, I think that probably if Richard Chin doesn't get injured, you can probably look at it and sort of justify it and say, well, he was ahead of 80 in the pecking order. We've got a few wingers. We'll go down that route. Whereas now we're a bit like, okay, we need all hands on deck. So, yeah, just a comfortable 3-0 win yesterday for the Mo. So that was positive.
I came off the bench after an hour.
But rather than focusing on them, we've got one final chance to talk about, Don. Allan, chance at the end of the pitch. Break up the pitch, Callum Smith header. Opportunity maybe there to steal all 3 points at the end. It looked quite a difficult one for him to shape the ball towards the goal. What did you make of that chance when it came up?
It was the nicest bit of football we played all day as well. Good to see Stevenson, still coming out at that point. Forget was it Montague that played him in?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, really nice little ball through to him. Tremendous ball from Stevenson into the ball. The bend and it was you'd argue maybe not the best height because it's not really high enough for a normal header and it's too high to go with the feet. But still in a really kind of difficult area. The keeper can't come for it. The defence are struggling to go for it. I thought Smith did well to get something on it and actually direct it towards the goal. If he'd got it in, it would have been, first of all, a very, very good header and a very, very good goal. And it'd also have been really hilarious to hear the noise coming from the home end. It just would have been brilliant.
Yeah, that was my main thing with that as well. I really wanted to go in just for that as much as anything. I thought at the time that Lewis Stevenson had almost gone too early with his cross because he's got, basically for the first time in the whole game, there's space in front of a Rovers player, but I actually think the cross is brilliant. It's because it's not a hit and hope. He looks up and he sees where Smith is, and Smith is
a very good run actually.
Yeah, he's goal side of, I assume, Boys, unless he'd gone off by that point. But Diabate's out of line effectively, so Stevenson can put the cross, behind Diabate, but with Smith getting that first contact. And as you say, it's a difficult chance. You're not putting that down as a sitter or anything by any means at all. And I think he does the right thing by going for it with his head, and it's tricky technique. But it was good to see. It's a nice little bit of football from Kai Montague in the build-up as well.
Yeah,
I think to
very good
kind of make a massive assumption. I'm guessing this is what Imrie was saying to him at full time, and I think what he's actually saying to him is, you could have gone for that first time. Because when he runs onto the ball, it's nodded back to him by Callum Smith, and he takes the easy option effectively, which it works out perfectly well. But his first thought is to just sort of lay the ball to Lewis Stevenson, when actually he could have turned into that kind of clean air. But that's the kind of thing you learn, and if the way that you learn that is because the manager's straight there to you to say, listen, because it wasn't. Again, I'm 60 yards away from this conversation, but it didn't look to me like he was going like, for goodness sake, why didn't you turn? He was saying to him, look, you could have gone, take the confidence that you can actually go and kind of drag that on. So
it's easy to forget actually that Dougie Imrie was in fact a pretty decent footballer, for Scottish football level. In the midfield, he was a fairly tough, but he could play football as well.
He had the technique behind him,
yeah, absolutely. And that rounded off the game for us. So a 0-0 draw against the Saints. In his post-match interview, Dougie Imrie speaking about sort of how well the defence did, Duncan. I guess what he terms of best front four in the division. Promise I've not been drinking before this. Just what were the positives that you took out the game?
So I think, as I kind of touched on already, the biggest positive for me was that it was exactly what you would want / expect from Dougie Imrie. Like, I think you hire Dougie Imrie because he gives you afternoons like that. And that's not the pinnacle. It's not like, we're going to gather loads of single points going away in the league. But it's a case of, to be perfectly blunt, I don't think we get that point under Barry Robson. I don't think, based on a very small sample size, we get that point under Paul Hanlon either. I think the things that you see in that game that lead to the patterns that you see and the way that game develops are Dougie Imrie trademarks, effectively. And the reason I find that reassuring, the reason that's the biggest positive for me, is again because it's deliberate and it is evidence of a plan in action. And it's not just a case of, you got these results doing X, Y, Z because you had good players at that time or whatever it is. And I think nobody's looking at Dougie Imrie's record at Morton and going, well, it's because of all these superstars you had playing for you. So we expected that to be the case. But it's like, I suppose it's the question of is your manager adding value, to use kind of shite kind of business speak, I suppose. But Dougie Imrie's absolutely adding value to that Rovers side in that game yesterday, because they were doing things they wouldn't have done earlier in the season, and I think they are things that add up to getting a better result than we probably would have had otherwise. I mean, the most obvious example, the most visible example, was just Josh Rae taking forever over his goal kicks.
Yeah.
And I have sort of two things to say on this. First of all, very funny. Just like
a lot of sore throats going about at the moment, Duncan. So it's important to keep well hydrated.
Like one of these, it's like so easy to get rattled by that. Just don't. This is actually my second point. Anyway, I'll come back to it. But it works because it's what you're doing is you are twofold. You're killing the rhythm of the game. So when St Johnstone are in the ascendancy, which they were for large parts of the first half, in particular, they want to get going. They want the ball in play. They want to be coming at you. And if they have to wait 10 seconds or 15 seconds longer, it's one more thing that they're not getting their own way. You can't really do it with the ball in hand anymore if you're the goalkeeper, so you do it with your goal kicks, and you take your time, and you wait and see if the referee is going to do something about it. And on this occasion, he's not, so that's totally fine. So you just take your time, you wind up their players in their own heads, and very audibly, you wind up their supporters. And that, in turn, puts pressure on their players. So just a lovely little example of a very simple thing that we know Dougie Imrie's teams do, because we've seen Lewis Strapp at Starks Park wandering around like a geriatric turtle to come and take throw-ins on the wrong side. My second point on this is, can we not get wound up by it, please? Because there was people in that away end getting ratty about Josh Rae taking his time. It's like, I have to say, you don't have to like it, but we are going to be doing it in certain circumstances. You might as well just accept it now.
Yeah.
In the quest for a more zen life, just accept that we're now going to be killing games like that and just let it be. That is my advice to the wider support of this.
It's far more enjoyable than watching Josh Fowler break through in the final 10 minutes of a game. And it's hurtling down on goal, and you're like, why is nobody stopping him? Because we need to be doing more stuff like that with the response and the answer. I think that if you're a St Johnstone fan and you're watching that, absolutely, my head would absolutely be gone, because you're spending about you're getting the ball, and it's about 5 or 6 passes. You sling it across, and there was a good number of times that we were guilty of this yesterday, where the ball just went right out the other side, out of play. And then Josh Rae's at it again, and you're thinking, this goalkeeper that was so terrible with us, this goalkeeper that's now 8 clean sheets in the league, joint top with Toby Stewart. Alan, just
it was like when Big Kev used to catch it and then fall down every time, and then take about 10 seconds to get up, and opposition fans used to get so wound up about it, and it was just like, yeah, go on. Thoughts overall, if you'd have offered me a draw before the game, I would have absolutely bitten your hand off for it. Even a 0-0. And so, in one way, a 0-0's preferable, because you think, excellent, clean sheet, we're being solid. A score draw is great, because you think, oh, we're scoring goals. So that you kind of look at it for both ways. Ultimately, a new manager comes in, he can only work with the tools he has at his disposal, and the way you many managers have said it over the years, you start from the back. You make yourself solid, you make yourself well organised and difficult to beat, and then once you've got that, you kind of work your way forward, kind of sort the midfield out, get them creating, and then work with the strikers that you've got. Maybe bring in someone new if you have to, and kind of sort out the goal scoring. He's said it numerous times already in interviews. He recognises we do not score enough goals, and we need to do something about that. We've all known that for quite a while. So it's overall very kind of positive that you can. I don't think I've ever seen a new manager come in and his impact is so apparent so quickly. Like even last week against Allan, you could see that was his team and they were doing the things that he wanted them to do. You saw even more yesterday. Saturday. I'd expect a bit more tomorrow night against Hamilton, and then again against County at the weekend. The longer they work with him, I think the more we're going to see his influence come through. And then the kind of 2 reaction things at the end. Valakari were both surprised and a wee bit annoyed with the boos he was getting. Like you saw him kind of turn around and look at the fans and say, kind of, really? And then the other one is, if you'd have told me 6 months ago that I would be in a crowd of people chanting Dougie towards Dougie Imrie, I would never have believed you. Never. But I was there, and I was indeed chanting.
Good. That's all I'm saying to it. Like, I'm really happy that we're at a point where it's like, I think it's been an astute appointment, and at least in the initial sense, that we've brought in a man that understands. He's certainly known this squad long enough. Not as we touched on in the pre-match, on a sort of personal level, and he's been the one to sort of bring that up. But he recognises where our strengths and weaknesses are. He recognises the strengths and weaknesses of each individual player. So really keen to see how this pans out going forward. Before we get back to league duties, Duncan, we do have a bit of a different situation now with Scottish football's favourite basket case club, because there's no other way to introduce them. Dougie Imrie's had a long association with Hamilton Accies, but at the moment, a club which is really in dire straits, no other way of putting it. What do you make of their current situation, if we're going for our longest ever episode?
I was going to say, how long have we got? Deary me. It's a bit of a kind of paradox, I think, Hamilton Accies. Like, they are behind the scenes, possibly the most shambolic football club ever? ? Like, just in the sense that if you went back sorry, I had a sudden second guess there where I was like, am I about to libel someone on a podcast? I'll temper what I was going to say, actually. Yeah, just so there have been a whole host of different people involved with Hamilton Accies, and over time, some of them have come in and some of them have gone out and all this kind of stuff. And ultimately now they've only really got one guy left who's now putting up minutes of board meetings where he is by himself. Which is a totally crazy situation. I mean, first and foremost, I actually really feel sorry for anybody who's an Accies supporter, because they don't seem to have even any of the kind of normal levers that you have as a football support. And a lot of the time it's very difficult and there's not a lot you can do. But even by those standards, they're very much at the whim of other people, and it's incredibly difficult to see what's going on.
Let's not forget as well, the one guy they've got has also already been deemed not fit and proper by the SFA.
Absolutely, yeah. This is it, and it's just like there's so many of these different things that you can point at. I mean, our old pal Callum Blythe almost certainly will be putting dents in YouTube servers across the globe. There'll be entire data centers in New Mexico filled with his latest updates on this, because it's just every day there's something else, and it's some sort of madness to the point where John Rankin felt like he had no choice but to walk away. But this is what I mean by the fact it's a bit of a kind of paradox, because despite all of that and more, they're quite good at football still. Like, they've got good players. They seem to have, a really decent functioning team. They're not always great. They've lost a couple of games recently, but I think they drew with Stenhousemuir yesterday. That's not a bad result at all. Got away to Stenny and take a point. And it feels like, I mean, it's sad to say, but it feels like that will continue to a point and then absolutely drop off a cliff. And it may well be it's the 1st of January. It may well be there's some sort of event before or after that where the entire house of cards just comes tumbling down. But if it's not in the next, 36 hours or something as we record this, ultimately, that's a pretty tough game of football on Tuesday. Yeah. When you look at all the teams that we could have played in the Challenge Cup, I mean, actually, quite literally, we were one of the top seeds and Accies were one of the bottom seeds, but only because they had a points deduction, one of many, for their Challenge Cup group. So we should have actually had a much easier game on paper. So, but yeah, just really difficult to know what to make. I mean, it's always tricky when you get situations where guys aren't being paid on time, or they're being paid at 5 to midnight because somebody's had to phone round and sort out last minute finance. So, as I say, I mean, honestly, who knows what version of Accies will turn up? But
ultimately, that's the thing. You feel sorry for the fans, absolutely, because they just want to have a club to turn up and support. They prefer to have one in their own town, but they don't want to go and support Clyde, who are playing there for some reason. But also, you do have to feel really sorry for the players, because they don't know if they're going to get paid at the end of the month. And it's all very well to say, oh, they're professional footballers. These are the guys who have been getting paid, 50 grand a week and have, got several million squirreled away. These are guys who, probably live, paycheck to paycheck, like most of the country. If they don't get paid, there's a chance their mortgage doesn't get paid. Their kids aren't getting Christmas presents, that kind of thing. It is that serious for them. Think about anyone who thinks the whole thing's a bit of a laugh. Think how you would feel if you suddenly weren't getting paid. You'd be really, really worried, and
sounded like
that. Be able to go out and do your job properly. It'd be really hard.
Sounded like that was really the kind of last straw for John Rankin. Just reading between the lines, but that last interview he did, it really felt like he'd spent an entire day fielding phone calls from his own players saying, like, my direct debit's come out tomorrow and my wages haven't come in today. And it felt like that, more so than anything else, was just the breaking point for him. And it's like, I kind of deal with this. It's not
I
fair.
do wonder. Yeah, they kind of hinted at it on the Terrace episode as well when they were talking to the Accies fan whether the use of the word, calling himself a front, whether there was a wee deliberate hint towards criminal activity in the background there. And to be fair, I'm sitting here saying the whole thing's not funny. Genuinely, the one part of it that I find genuinely funny is that I think Serif Zingen was complaining that when he went to some disciplinary thing, the guy for the SFA was wearing a Hawaiian shirt and drinking a can of Monster. It's like, what the fuck? It's Scottish football. You've got to love it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just absolutely surreal. For the fans, it's just hard to see a way out for them. Like, in the sense that they've not got an Alan Savage, for example. Like, Cali, they went through that, but you always kind of had that inkling of, like, we were chatting in our chat, in our podcast group chat about, like, October last year. And maybe it's blasé for us to say, because we are not in the situation where our club's in administration, and we're like, aye, but they've got Alan Savage, he's going to sort them out. So it's maybe really easy from our perspective to be like, aye, but they've got that guy on the side. Accies don't have that. It's very much like, okay, you've got that, but then you can go back to New Douglas Park, and then you've got Colin McGowan there, and then it's a bit like, well, how do you do a Phoenix club if you're going down that route? How do you move forward with that if you need to, and how do you get that organised? Because it certainly feels like at the moment with the club that you've got, there's so much baggage attached. It's just unreal. It's like
we're at the stage where administration feels like an inevitability, and I don't know that they've got what it takes to come through that. The points deduction that comes with it would almost certainly see them down, because what else would come with that is they would get rid of so many of the players. They'd have to cut the wage bill down. They've got a big squad for League One. They'd have to get rid of some players. They would see guys like Ollie Shaw as and Scott Roberts and guys like that as sellable assets that they can maybe get a little bit for. Also, they'll be on very good wages, so they'll be the first guys to go for that reason. So you're going to be dropping down the table with a points deduction, and then having a much poorer squad to go forward with. So you almost then think, if administration happens and they actually survive it, they're almost certainly going to be down in League Two, and you're going to have some up and coming kind of former like junior teams come. So it's not even that.
I think
it's really tough for them.
The biggest problem for Hamilton, I think, from my perspective, looking at it, is that there's a complete lack of like rationality about the whole thing. Like when you look at Inverness or you look at Dumbarton, to take the two kind of recent ones from over the last season or two, it's all known factors and it's all known people, and it's generally historic stuff that's catching up. But ultimately, it becomes sort of a numbers game of, this is the debt in total, these are the people it's owed to. Can we find an agreement at which point all of these people say, yes, we'll accept that amount of payment? And I think, in Dumbarton's case, I think ultimately it was a case of they didn't. They actually ended up liquidating and rebuilding. But everyone involved is like a rational actor. Everyone is making decisions based on known factors, like what is the most money I can get back from this? Or how can I save this football club? In the shape of, like the supporters and the trusts that are involved in all these kind of things. And as you say, Robbie, like with the Inverness one, like Alan Savage comes in very early doors and basically says, like, as long as it's a realistic prospect of a successful outcome, I will effectively underwrite this. Like, I will be the white knight. If everyone else gets on board, we'll push this through. Hamilton, like, there's none of that. To the point where even the first question of, right, cool, we're administration is going to happen. What's the debt? Don't know. They released a set of accounts a few months ago that was unaudited and just appeared to be completely removed from reality. It just didn't have any bearing on the previous year's set of accounts, let alone the real world. So can you rely on even the due diligence at a basic level of what is the situation? How much is owed? Who is it owed to? And even if you do get to that, you then have this web of the people involved and their interests and all this kind of stuff. And even if you can then sort that out and you can go, right, okay, yes, this is what's owed. Yes, this is who it's owed to. Yes, we've found someone who has some money, not a foregone conclusion by any means at all. And you can then come to a deal to actually say, yes, we will hand over control for X pence in the pound. You then still have the problem of Hamilton Accies have effectively been a delinquent football club for the best part of the last few years. So you've got all these licensing issues. There's not a stadium. So you could actually, as I say, all the stuff that normally you would say, right, that's all the difficult stuff. Arranging through the administration and all that kind of stuff. You get through all of that. And at the end up, you own a football club that then loses its SFA licence because it hasn't met any of the licensing criteria for 24 months. Like, it's a really, really difficult situation to see. What I think a positive outcome. The only thing I can hope is that there is someone in an incredibly out of character move for Hamilton Accies, someone who's incredibly publicity shy, incredibly media shy, who is working in the background to effectively deliver a fully top to tail solution where they effectively just one day go, there you go, it's actually not what you think. All of these factors are actually different, and here's why. But I can't see that at all. It just based on everything that's available, they look, honestly, I think they look doomed.
Yeah, honestly, it's so hard to see a situation, and it's such a shame as well. Like, I've been on when they used to do it, Ben and Brandon did Only Accies, which was their podcast, and that was when the club first, I think Colin McGowan had just taken charge of Accies at that point, before it had even moved over to Sheriff Sengan and Jerry Strain being in charge there. Just chatting with them and the Accies fans, and it's the same for any club in Scotland. Like, you're all ultimately same situation. You're all basically in the same boat, where it's you follow your local team, you'll go up and down the country, you'll get very high moments. For them, it's the Challenge Cup final, it's getting through the playoffs, it's their game at Inverness, where they got promotion there. For Rovers, obviously, we've seen our own, and you can do that up and down the country, and everyone's got their relative successes. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the people that you can go and sit and have a pint with and just chat about it, and you've got a sort of common shared experience across the board when you're at this level of football. To see people lose that because they don't know what's going to happen with a Phoenix club and how that could potentially get organised. They don't know if their current club's going to get saved or whether they can finally go back to Hamilton or how that goes. It just feels like there's too many, they're getting pulled in too many directions along with the basis of what you've said as well, Duncan. I think that with January, I'd be very, very surprised if a lot of the championship clubs aren't sort of circling around looking at a lot of the basically sharks in the water. Because, look, that's it's the law of the jungle, so to speak. You're always going to have clubs there willing to pick up the pieces if you're falling to bits. We've seen it before. I mean, probably a good example for us would be when Joe Cardle arrived in Kirkcaldy from Dunfermline.
Yeah.
Left there because of administration and then came right in the door with us and then obviously became a cup winner in the Challenge Cup final. So that's probably an example of, I mean, you could be looking down that route. We've seen before with Rangers where players have walked away because of the sort of situations with contracts and things like that. So how much loyalty these players will feel to the club, again, it's a completely unanswerable question unless you put it to them themselves. On the game itself, Alan, is there anyone that's, I mean, obviously with Accies, you've got Ollie Shaw up top with O'Hara and a few familiar names there like Smith, etc. Darian McKinnon is only going to be his second game in charge. I mean, with all the mood music going about, do you think it's a very tough one to judge as to what to expect from them?
It definitely is, yeah. I mean, you kind of wonder what, how motivated are they going to be to go out there and play again. And, you know, yeah, the prize money is obviously a lot better in this competition this year, but based on what's happened in the last few weeks, they're not going to get that anyway because it's going to be withheld until the SPFL are confident they can fulfil the season. So they've not even got that to help them. So, you know, as a club, as a team, you wonder where their motivation is going to come from. You'd think ultimately they're professional footballers. Once they get out there on the pitch, it's 11 guys against 11. They will just go out there and do what they've done for, since they were kids, and go out there and just try their hardest. And as Duncan said earlier, they've got some talent in that team. It's not going to be an easy game, but so have we. And that's where you kind of Dougie Imrie's got a difficult decision to make, because ordinarily you look at the Challenge Cup and think it's a chance to give some guys a bit of time. You'd be looking at maybe starting Montague, starting Callum Smith. But as we said, kind of the way the draw's gone, you potentially have to go with a full strength team. Certainly at the back, we've not really got any other options at the back. So it's going to be Hanlon and O'Connor, unless he maybe if one of them was feeling a bit of a niggle, you maybe put Doherty in there and bring in Jero. Maybe you start Jero anyway, because it's a chance to see a bit more of him. I at this point, I genuinely don't know what Dougie Imrie's going to do. It's as I say, the prize money is so much better in this competition now, and it's the one thing we've still to play in this season that you think we could win this.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to go for it and try. And I think you get 150,000 for winning the thing. That's a lot of money to a couple of Rovers. So you kind of have to go out there and try your best to win every game. Even
going out at this stage would be more than we get for going out in the Scottish Cup.
45 grand I think at this stage or something, isn't it? So it's it's a competition that fair play to the SPFL. Actually, they've brought in sponsors for it. They've kind of really tried to big it up. I don't know that I like the format change this year, but it doesn't affect us too much because we weren't involved in that. If we were to get relegated somehow and have to play in that stupid, I'd hate that league phase. And yeah, in theory, the change they made for this round was supposed to help us because we were in the kind of second group of seeds, if you like, or third. But we got unlucky with it. But yeah, they've done a lot to try and rescue this as a kind of feasible competition and one that the clubs want to take seriously. I get what you're saying there.
Skepticism there, Duncan.
And ultimately, most of the championship fans in particular probably don't give a shit about it until semi-final. But I think there are, as clubs, the directors of those clubs will almost will certainly value the competition because of the money that comes away from progressing in it.
Yeah, but I think that's personally, I think that's quite sleek it almost, like just making your competition materially worse and then just upping the prize money to the point and like it just always it's just like right, you see it as like a pilot of like, right, this is our new competition structure, and you've got like maybe 4 chairmen in the room and they're like, that looks terrible, and you've got like a button and you just like, right, but this is the prize money, and they go, you're just pressing it until they start smiling, and you're like, right, cool, there we go. We needed to make it whatever it is, 30 grand if you get knocked out at this point, or 45, whatever it is.
Why do I have visions of Squid Game with a giant pig with cash flying into it?
Basically,
all these people just like, there's terrible competition. Yeah, but look at that.
You do worry that they'll now do the same with the League Cup as well, don't you? It's like, oh, it worked so well for the Challenge Cup, let's do it to the League Cup as well.
Just a nonsense. I mean, I can't remember how many games they played to eliminate 8 teams or whatever it was, but it was an inordinate amount of football that was played. And all the Colt teams get beat, of course, as they always do.
The only reason 2 of them went through is because 2 of them had to go through.
Yeah, because they have to.
At least.
Yeah, there's 10 of them enter and 8 of them get knocked out. So, yeah, my argument would have been, why not have all that prize money and a good tournament? That would have been nice.
Well, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, anyway, being slightly kind of glib. One thing, just very briefly, in Dougie Imrie's interview after the St Johnstone game, and he was very, as you say, very open about his connections to Hamilton and how much that club means to him. And then he had a little bit where he kind of struggled to find the right word, and I really liked the one that he picked, where he said, he's like, me and my old pal Darian McKinnon So we'll be really friendly up until kick-off. And he kind of paused and he's like, we'll go to war. It's like, yes, that's what I want. Again, honeymoon period. Say anything you want. Pander to me.
Duncan.
That's what I want, yeah. This is it. Challenge Cup a Tuesday night against Hamilton in front of about 700 people. War.
Exactly.
Because this is the thing, sorry, that was the other point I was going to make on that, is the prize money absolutely does make a difference, and it does mean that teams will take it more seriously because directors will go to managers and say, listen, if you want that guy in January, here's how you can pay for him, you need to go and win this game. But that will not put bums on seats on a December evening. This is going to be a very small attendance. Dougie Imrie actually said that himself. He was like, what we want to do is start putting performances together, start putting points on the board so we can get people along. Not so much on Tuesday night, but from Saturday, which is because it's completely true. There's no getting away from this. They can put all the prize money. They can put all the prize money they want in it. This competition has been seriously devalued, and you can see that in the attendance numbers up till now in the previous rounds, and it's not going to change. I mean, I think we saw the Scottish Cup game at Alloa. Scottish Cup absolutely is still, the prestige competition, and we had 1,400 people there on a Saturday. Very, very few people are going to be there. There's no getting away from it. But I mean, it is what it is. It's for my part, very briefly, in terms of the team, I was looking at actually. I think I would basically play everyone who's on the bench on Saturday, other than Aidan Glavin and Josh Gentles, because I don't think you're really weakening the team that much. I think it's really that much of a downgrade. But what it would let you do is get a bit of rest into some guys who've had a lot of football recently. Thinking primarily of, like, Dylan Easton, for example, has played every minute he's been available, more or less, this season. Give him a wee bit of a rest and let Kai Montague get some minutes. And actually, that's probably your biggest one, where you're going from, like, well, there's a guy who's a standout at this level to a guy who's just coming through. The rest of them are like, Ewan Wilson's been picked ahead of Lewis Stevenson at times already this season. Jay Rowe, I think I'm keen to see more of. Ross Matthews coming in, that's not really a downgrade. Callum Smith, I would just put in a straight swap for Jack Hamilton.
Yep.
We've been talking a lot about Jack Hamilton. He's taken out the firing line. There's an opportunity. So that's the way I go.
Because you could always move Easton out left as well, and then put Montague into the middle, and then you're taking out Josh Mullen. So
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Josh Mullen's he's done absolutely fine on the left of the wing. But if you do want to go down that route, that's one that obviously Dougie Imrie can take. So, and we don't know as well if we might see if there's potential for Richardson to make the bench. As to if he's that close in his journey, we don't know. But if he is, it'd be a great sort of boost for the support to see him back, because we're all very keen to get him back as quick as possible.
You'd pay a tenner for that. That'd be worth your £10.
100%. That and war. Like, it's...
Which I am going to have to add to my playlist for Tuesday night, aren't I? War.
Yeah, so, I mean, a bit more seriously than talking about war. There is an appeal. It's going to be going out ahead of the game on Tuesday. I believe the Cottage Centre are doing a collection prior to the game. So, yeah, if you can keep an eye out for that, they'll be out and about outside the Starks Park prior to the match against Hamilton. Only £10 to get into the game, so discounted tickets at least if you're looking for some pre-Christmas entertainment. We'll be back to have a full debrief of that match, as well as looking ahead to a visit on Saturday from a Ross County side who are all out of sorts. And where have I heard this one before? Yet to be seen if Tony Dock will still be in charge there. But time will tell. But until then, thank you as ever for taking the time to listen, and we will be back with you shortly. Bye for now.